Printix Analytics, how to set up and configure. Welcome to this tutorial on how to apply Printix Analytics. So we can use analytics, meaning tracking data, user behavior, who's printing what, when, to which printer. We will need to set up the database. There are two ways of setting up the database in Printix. One is the Printix hosted database, and the other is your own database. With the Printix hosted database, you get 30 days worth of history, and this is rolling. So the report will only reflect tracking data for the past 30 days. The database is exported twice per day, so the reporting you will see later on in the PowerBi dashboard might lag up to 12 hours behind. With your own database, you get 90 days worth of history, and alternatively you can check the box to keep the data forever. With Printix Analytics, the data stored in the Printix cloud is exported to this SQL Server, so either the Printix hosted one or the one you are hosting yourself. The online manual outlines how to set up the Printix hosted database, which is very straightforward, and also how to connect to your own SQL Server on Azure. In order to enable the reporting through Power BI, you would need to set up the database so that the information can be tracked in the first place. By default, this is not the case. Let's hop into the dashboard for my demo tenant and show you where you would set up the SQL Server. So we'll go to the menu, Settings, Analytics, and then create the database on the left side, which is the Printix hosted one. As you can see, I have already done so. If I hadn't, there would be a button down here saying Create, and then all you need to do is create, and after that, activate. That's all you need to do. If you like, you can tick the box Include document name in data extract. For compliance reasons, we don't track the document names users print by default. You need to enable this. If it is not enabled, we won't capture the document names and they will be anonymized in the report. If you like, you can also set up your own database and point it at the SQL Server on Azure. Here, we also have the additional option to keep the data forever. And also, once it's activated, include the document names in the data extract. You can check if the data extract is functional and when the last extract happened. Once you've set this up, we'll need to navigate to Printix's GitHub. As usual, the question mark will help you configure this step by step. So, how to set up Power BI will give you all the links into how to install Power BI Desktop, which is freely available on the Microsoft Store. Download the Printix Power BI Desktop file from our GitHub, and finally how to set up and interact with it. So let's do this. I already have Power BI Desktop installed on my computer. So I'll navigate to the Printix Power BI Desktop file on the GitHub. github.com Printix Power BI releases. This will take us to the GitHub and you can see the latest release notes on any changes that have been made. The template files are updated from time to time with improvements and possibly new reports. Please note that the Power BI reporting is an open source project, so you're welcome to change, customize and improve the report yourself as well. Ideally, you would go to the Power BI root and then go to code and download zip. When we do this, we will get the entire folder tree, including all files necessary to customize the report in one zip file. When we open this, we'll have to navigate to Power BI. Inside of these folders, we have the PowerPoint, so you can adjust the background images which are used in the default report. Please note, the template report is just a starting point containing 14 predefined reports. They are completely customizable. To open the report and edit it, we'll need to go to the Power BI folder and open the Printix pbit file, which is a Power BI template file. I'm going to use the latest version. By double-clicking on the file, Power BI will open. The first time you run the report, you'll need to enter some information. As a default value, we recommend 8,333. The cost per monosheet is essentially your black and white click. I'm going to use 0,10, so 10 cents per black and white click, and 0,50, so 50 cents per color click. The cost per sheet is the cost per piece of paper. So I'm going to use 0,01, 1 cent per sheet. And I'm going to choose euro as the display currency. By clicking on load, the Power BI template is now going to ask for the database connection. Here it is crucial to only enter the data in database. Windows and Microsoft account are irrelevant for this step. Please don't change anything on these two tabs. The information we require to populate these two fields, username and password, can be found in the Printix administrator for the according tenant. So this is based on each individual tenant or customer where you generate a separate report. In my case, I'm going to use the credentials for the Printix hosted database. We can simply copy it straight from the interface and then go back, paste, copy the password, paste the password, and then say connect. Once the connection to the database is established, the report will show data. In case you are running your own SQL Server on Azure, which you have entered on the right-hand side, you will need to set up the database connection slightly different. Also, if you change from the Printix hosted database to your own database, the data that has been tracked so far will transition across to your own database. So there's no loss of data by swapping from the Printix hosted database to your own. So let's take a look at Power BI. In Power BI, there are different options in connecting a SQL Server. I could go through the File menu, but in this case I'm going to choose to click onto the SQL Server icon in the Home ribbon. I'm going to enter the server address that I used in the Database Server Address field in Printix Administrator and click on OK. In the database connection, we simply enter our username and password that was used to create the database on Azure. Now we can connect. The SQL Server database on Azure is polled, and we're going to connect to the Printix DB. For this to work correctly, we'll have to select all tables. We can now click on Load. The connection to the SQL Server is established. The tables are queried. And there we are. We have now populated the data directly from our SQL Server on Azure. There are 15 predefined reports you can find below with these tabs. When we scroll over, there is an About the Report page. Please pay attention to this, as there are some important information contained in the disclaimer. You can customize any of the reports, delete them by clicking on the X on the tab, or even deleting or modifying certain aspects of the report shown. So if we click on this field, which is a table, we can see that this table contains the information vendor, model, location, etc. We've constructed this by the fields provided in the data export. Obviously, you can only report on information extracted to the database. Among countless options, like having different slices, tables, graphs, pie charts, and even external data imports, you can also have filters. We have filtered the entire report to only reflect print OK, because that is essentially the only thing that we're interested in. The template report has a filter across all pages. You can edit the sheets per tree and cost page by going to Transform Data and then click on Edit Parameters. This will open the mask where you can enter these values again and change the display currency. Also, you can change the database connect by going Transform Data, Data Source Settings. This will reopen the screen where we can edit the permission and then edit the credentials for the database connect. So if you want to connect to a different Printix tenant where you have set up analytics, you will have to come to this screen and change the username and password accordingly. When you save, you would then refresh, which will then pull the information from the new database, or simply refresh in case a new extract has just happened. Please note that the entire report is interactive. So if we click onto color, it's going to filter all these different tables, the print jobs printed in color. By clicking again, we unselect that. We could also show all the Lexmark devices by clicking on Lexmark. This is how you would filter the reports, and this is the method that you can apply on each single screen. So if you wanted to, you could filter the entire report by user. When we drop down this field, we can now choose an individual user and filter the report by that user. And also, at the top here, we can select the date range we want to report on. I just saw that on the user field here, we don't have any search capability, so we'll have to scroll through the list of users, which can be inconvenient when we have lots of users. To change this, I'm going to go to the ellipsis for this field, more options, and click on search. This way, the next time we drop down the menu, we have a search bar and can search for users straight away. We could also filter by printer. Let's say we just want to see pages printed to the CX725, and you'll see that the report filters only on pages printed to that printer. We also have the capability to now filter on home office printing. Home office printing meaning the home office print feature. Let's take a quick look at what the home office printing feature does. The home office printing feature only works with Azure AD and if you have synchronized your groups. What you can do here is you can add a group of computers out of Azure AD and change the default behavior of Printix client on those computers only. Meaning, if these computers are on an unknown network, which your private home office network will be initially, Printix client will try and find a printer on that network, and if it does, it will install a printer queue like an ad hoc printer queue automatically in your operating system. These printers and printer queues can be identified by the suffix at home, and this is exactly what we use to filter the report. So if we go to the home office printing and click on yes, it will only display print jobs that have been sent to a printer that was discovered and added by the home office printing feature. We can see the report is empty now, and this is because we still have the selection to this Lexmark CX725. So let's use the eraser and clean the filter. And there we are. We now have all the print jobs printed to a printer in the home office. And of course we can in addition filter on specific users and also choose the date range we want to report on. And this is the method you would use and apply for the entire report. Let's toggle off home office printing and say only the ones that were printed in the corporate office, so excluding home office printing. And there we are. Next, I'd like to show you how we can create a new report from scratch. So we'll click on the yellow plus, which is going to add a new tab. We can now put together a new report page to our liking. In Power BI, we can present information through different means. For this case, I'm going to choose a table. So we'll navigate over to the visuals and click on table. This will add a new table and it is already highlighted. This means I can use any kind of data that is provided by the data export we get from Printix. Please remember, Power BI is not connected straight to the Printix backend, but rather to the SQL Server that you have set up within your subscription, either the Printix hosted version or your own. So there is no way you can interfere and overwrite or delete any data. This is read only, and you can add some smarts using Power BI. So for this example, I'm going to show a list of users and I'm going to add a filter so we can search for individual users. The way this works is I have my table, it is highlighted. So if I go over here to my users and simply click on name and also email, I will have this table built dynamically based off of the information that is contained in the SQL Server dataset. I can now determine the layout of this table and position it however I like. Insert a background or possibly a logo so we can actually brand this entire report if need be. Let's also add another field by clicking on Department. We can now see that the Department field, that is the Department attribute in Azure AD, is now displayed. Users without the department, so that field is not maintained in Azure AD, will not show a department. Now let's make a search mask so we can search, for instance, by username or department. The way this works is through slices. There are several different ways of manipulating data in Power BI. I'm going to be showing using slices to do this. From my own experience, I can recommend going to YouTube and the internet and searching for free tutorials and courses in how Power BI can be applied in different scenarios. There is a ton of information out there free of charge. So let's add a slicer so we can search or filter this list, this table. I'm going to go to the slicer icon, click on it, and I get an empty slicer window. So we said we'll want to search by username. All we need to do is click on name, and here we have the full list of all users we can find in the database. To make this a drop down and searchable, all we need to do is pop down this little arrow and say this slicer shall be shown as a drop down. And then also what we want to do to give us the search field is go to the ellipsis and then say search. I can now reposition the window. I don't need it to expand. I don't need it to expand all the way down here. And when I pop this down and search for username, for instance, my own, Power BI will give me all the search results containing Damien in the name field. When I click on one of those names, it will filter the table on the left-hand side to only display that user. I could also configure this slicer to allow multiple selections. To give us a search bar based on departments, I can now simply highlight this slicer, hit Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V on my keyboard. So I've made a copy of this. You can see there's little helpers to get the layout right. And I would simply now change the field. I'm going to add the department and remove the name. Now I can search by department, and we can see that the choices I get are already pre-filtered by the first slicer. Without going into too much detail, let's just clean up the column headers. The way you would do this is you select the table and then you would double click into the column name here and just rewrite. I hit enter and it renames it in the table. So this way you can give your columns custom names. It doesn't have to be what the data set has provided. Let's refine this report a little more and add controls to filter by date range. For this, I'm going to highlight these two slices, reposition them to make some space in the top right corner. Then I'll hop over into the Service Desk tab, which already has date controls, which I can simply highlight, Control C, pop back into the page I've just created, Control V, and I have my date controls there. I can synchronize this so it will filter across the entire report. So now I can view details in this report based on date ranges. Again, there are different ways of presenting this information and changing the way this control works. You can also pop over into the visuals and then start switching on and off the slicer header, etc. And finally, let's add two more pie charts, which I'm going to copy from a different report page. In this case, we have in the locations overview two pie charts that will display the breakdown on duplex versus simplex, black and white and color print jobs. So I'm just going to highlight both, holding down Control, then copying these two pie charts or visuals by pressing Control C, then hopping back onto my new report and then pressing Control V on my keyboard. We can see that the visuals have been pasted, and I'm going to grab them, reposition them down here. And the reason there's no data that is displayed is because there are no print jobs tracked for this user in that date range. I'm going to switch the user so we get the visuals shown, and there we are. We can see that I have printed one page in black and white and simplex within this date range. If you wanted to modify these visuals, you can simply click on them and you will see which information is displayed. You can modify this by going to the visual formatting and then switch on and off the legend, change the text, the font, the colors. The sky's the limit. Of course, you can display this information in different ways. Going back to the data section of this visual, I get to choose out of different ways of presenting this data. So I can simply click through and find the most suitable visual representation of the data that suits my requirements. This is just changing the way the same data is displayed. Next, we want to publish this report to the workspace. So in my case, I do have a Power BI Pro license, which is about 10 euros a month over here in Germany. This allows me to publish and share the report. When I click on Publish, it's going to ask me if I want to save these changes. I'm going to save it. And it's going to ask me which of my workspaces, I can have multiple, I want to publish this report to. So I'm going to leave it on the default setting, which is my workspace. And because this report is already published, I can simply replace it. So if I were to make any changes like we did just now, I can replace the existing report that is already shared, so everyone that has the link to this report gets the update automatically. Power BI is now publishing this report, and we are done. Okay, so let's look at the report through my workspace and eventually as a website. I have navigated to the Power BI section within my Office 365 subscription. Here's my workspace, and here we can see the report I just published. The report won't automatically update the data. We need to set up a schedule. To do this, we'll go to the dataset. By hovering over the dataset, we get this icon, Schedule Refresh. So when I click on this, among different settings, I can now schedule a refresh. I'm going to say I want to refresh this report daily. And please remember, this is running on my own SQL Server, so Printix is going to push an update 4 times a day. So it doesn't make sense to update more than 4 times a day because the data will be the same. So I can now add multiple times, and I would ideally look into my Printix administrator to see when it refreshes. So when I create that database connect, it basically sets the starting point of when the refresh will happen moving forward. So I'd try to match that. In my case, I'm just going to go with 9 in the morning and 9 at night. What I can do now is I can come back into the overview, I can share the report, or I could open the report directly in my web browser. We get all the different report tabs, and we can scroll through the report interactively like we did in Power BI Desktop. So from here, all you really need to do is share the report through a public or private link inviting your colleagues. You can share the link by copying the link, by email, through Teams, PowerPoint. So there's many different ways of getting the link out and making the report available to your colleagues. Power BI does offer a raft of functionality, and I've only touched the very tip of the iceberg. Please feel free to investigate further, search the web, maybe check out some very interesting YouTube channels. There is an abundance of information on how Power BI works and what can be done with it. I hope you found this helpful, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you.